Well, I'll kick this off. If I had um, a, a slap from the movies, I would do that. Hello, everyone. My name is Hayden. I am the chair of the Student Forum, and with us today we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Gareth Dillon Smith, who's what did we say, Gareth? Is it United UK and US, both the United Kingdom and the United States? Is an assistant professor at Boston University and a drummer, and a fantastic drummer at that. Is a writer, editor, drum teacher, drummer, as mentioned, and professor. Gareth, I'm sure many of you are familiar with his work. Anyone with a keen eye, a nose, and an interest in music education has read something of Gareth's work. I'm sure his research includes, of course, drumming and drummers, but he's also got punk method, what would you call them? The punk philosophies and punk sociologies, do it yourself, doing it with others, eudaimonia. That's where I stumbled into your work, Gareth, was around the eudaimonia work. Is it 33 peer-reviewed articles, 43 books, I believe, book chapters, and 15 books. If there's anyone who knows how to write, it is certainly yourself. Some of those books include A Philosophy of Playing the Drum Kit. It was 2022. I Drum, Therefore I Am, maybe the best title of a music book ever, from 2013. And Conversations at the Drums is a forthcoming work of his coming soon. On top of all of this, a founding co-editor of the Journal of Popular Music Education, past president of the Association for Popular Music Education, a former two-term ISME board member, serves on the steering committee for the International Society for the Sociology of Music Education. This is a lot. There's a lot that this man does, and he's got an awful lot that he can teach you today. So please do some digital clapping, but also perhaps clapping in your seat as well. I'd love to introduce Dr. Gareth Dillon Smith from Boston University. Take it away whenever you're ready, Gareth.
Goodness me. Well, thank you for a rousing introduction, Hayden. I very much appreciated. Oops. Where's my presentation gone? There it is. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you all for having me. Thank you all for giving up your valuable time. Goodness knows. Very much appreciated. I hope it's worth your while. If it isn't, I shan't be offended if you duck out. But thank you all so much for showing up today. Let's play this. Is someone else admitting people as well, by the way, so I don't have to keep admitting people? I seem to be a host. All right. Per the advertisement, I'm going to be talking a little bit about academic publishing with some what, where, why, where, how, and with whom questions. Yeah, let's see what happens. So, yeah, very excited to be invited to give this presentation. Thank you so much. I look really cool in the advertisement. So hopefully, like I said, hopefully this will this will live up to the hype. I'm not quite sure how long I'll talk for, maybe 20, 25 minutes, and then I really would like to have questions from people who are here, questions, comments, because this is really much more about you than it is me. So hopefully I'll present some things that are helpful and then make it more helpful by having some discussion in a bit. So a couple of things about me. This is not me, but I identify as having ADHD, which is exciting and kind of feels like a superpower half the time, because it enables me to focus really hard on things, and it also means I get distracted very easily by things. So it feels kind of like maybe like kryptonite at the same time. So the reason I mention this is this features kind of large in my experience as a writer, as someone who's involved in editing and reviewing academic publications. And I think a key kind of feature of ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, is I'm not sure it's really a disorder. It's a feature. But anyway, it enables people to have extreme focus. And focusing on one thing, of course, means not focusing on all the other things I could be doing. Like this morning when I was maybe putting the finishing touches to this presentation or writing it from scratch, no one's sure. I ignored everything else that I could have been doing today, like all of the emails that are definitely arriving from work. So anyway, this features in my presentation. It's a feature of how I do my life. So thank you for your patience. Oh, actually, also some thoughts from a friend of mine about having ADHD.
Let us explain. I've been with you since you could tell time. Went to school with you when you were a child. You were so clever, but never could keep your busy mind together. A standstill in line. You've been watching your life on a TV. The high definition's amazing, but distracting adding you crazy. You You've been watching with ADHD. I'm the reason they think that you're lazy. Start a project but finish them maybe. Probably not cause your focus is fading. Stare at the window at trees while they're swaying. Wanna sleep but our minds on the run. Lights are all off but that light switch is up. Won't get a wink until that is undone.
Anyway, a colleague and friend of mine, Ryan McLaughlin, put this song together about various mental health conditions. Moving on. So, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about ISME and me. I've been thrilled and very privileged to be involved in ISME for quite a while now. Time flies. I think I got involved in 2008. So, this being the ISME Student Forum, when I first went, the first ISME conference I went to was in 2008, as I mentioned. So that was in Bologna in Italy, and there was I attended the meeting of the what became at the time it was the Instrumental Teaching Forum, I think we were calling it. And I was invited to become part of the steering committee for that, or the working group, or whatever we were calling ourselves. And yeah, it's now the Instrumental and Vocal Music Teaching Commission. And I remember when we were putting this together in 2008, we were told that under no circumstances was there room in ISME for another commission, because that involved a whole ream of paperwork and years of operational decisions and all kinds of things, and we had to just be a forum. And I was quite happy being in a forum. I didn't really know the difference. But anyway, it was very cool, and it was great to meet like-minded people and work on projects you all cared about and find people who, you know, cared about what I cared about. It was really very cool. So I think maybe this is obvious, but, you know, one of the great things about being involved in any forum, and hopefully the student forum for all of you, is the networking opportunities it provides. Networking sounds, I don't know, it can sound exciting, it can sound terrifying, maybe it sounds kind of manipulative or something, but it's necessary, right? And I think, you know, in any profession, it's important to network. It's important the people we know, because ultimately an awful lot of what we do is about relationships, and that'll be a recurring theme, I think, in my presentation this morning. So hopefully this provides opportunities for you all to build a network, because the people in the forum are, you know, they are your peers. They are the people with whom you will be jamming on ideas, as it were. I think one of my favorite things about ISME and about groups of people with whom I have things in common is that we can share ideas, and they resonate with people, they don't resonate with other people, and it's kind of like a jam session for ideas. I like my jam session of music metaphors because, you know, I'm a musician first and foremost. You know, I think there's hopefully opportunities for learning and growth and inspiration in a forum of like-minded folks, and even not that like-minded, you know, depending on what we have in common. Being a student may not mean that we're all necessarily like-minded, but hopefully we can learn and grow from one another. And I certainly expect to learn and grow from you all this morning, or this afternoon, this evening, given the number of time zones in which ISME operates. I'm by the way, would like to congratulate or celebrate Sri Vaidyanathan for getting this at exactly the right time. I am hopeless when it comes to organizing things across time zones. So Sri, thank you. Would like to acknowledge that you made this happen at the right time for everybody. No mean feat. And, you know, collaboration is essential, I think. It can feel like I don't know. I feel like in the United States at the moment, people feel like we're less inclined to collaborate, maybe, or there's a push to collaborate less than I might like in some domains. But I feel like collaboration is essential. And again, this is going to be a recurring theme throughout the talk. It's a great place to meet and make friends. We don't have to make friends with our peers, but, you know, sometimes it's great to make friends. Also, there's lots of free labor involved in anything like this. I'm not sure how many of us are getting paid or how much for any of the time we're spending this morning. But academia is full of free labor. Well, it depends if it's free. It depends kind of how we think about it. But I don't want to understate or overstate. I'll just state that all of the academic publishing world is it's a labor market, and some people are compensated better than others for it. So let's and you know, there's an awful lot of free labor. But also there's a lot of exciting reward. So, you know. Okay, so to the first of my W's, the what of academic publishing. Some of this will probably be very obvious and familiar to people. Some of it may be less so. So thank you for your patience, and hopefully there's some takeaways too. So I'm going to say there's broadly two types of academic publishing: the peer-reviewed kind and a non-peer-reviewed kind. As I've mentioned at the bottom here, non-peer-reviewed means it's not peer-reviewed, not that it's reviewed, but by non-peers. And who our peers are is sometimes out of our control. But anyway, peer-reviewed and non-peer-reviewed publications. So non-peer-reviewed publications, things you can get to press without any interference or feedback or commentary or help, critique from our peers, include blog posts and social media posts or rants. I used to keep a blog when I had more free time on my hands, I suppose. And I confess, Hayden very kindly introduced me as a as a prolific writer. I love to write. I've always loved to write, and I realize not everybody is gifted with that particular curse, as it were. Um, but I've always enjoyed writing, and that's helpful in this profession, I think. Certainly helpful to where I am at present. So yeah, non-peer-reviewed publications can involve personal blog posts or blog posts for ISME or for other professional organizations. And maybe there are magazines which are maybe online, maybe in print, maybe both, at the kind of local, state, national levels. And these generally involve, people asking for an opinion piece or a kind of commentary about your work or something, something about your experience as a music teacher, as a researcher, as a student that would it'd be helpful to share, interesting to share, and a part of a public discourse in a sense. And maybe it's helpful to do things like do podcasts and do TikToks and YouTube channels. This could be brilliant because apparently the attention of everybody today is shrinking. We have much shorter attention spans than we used to. But academia persists in discussing things via 7,000 word articles. So, but in terms of academic publishing, I've said really not, because these things tend not to be valued as highly by kind of gatekeepers in the profession. So more about that later if it comes up. Okay, so on to peer-reviewed publications, which is what most of this talk is about, this presentation at least today. There are journal articles in our professional journals, periodicals of the profession. Book chapters, we can be invited to write book chapters. We can sometimes submit book chapters without invitation to collaborative projects. Conference proceedings. Sometimes a conference will have a sort of book or a journal issue they might put out following the conference. And this is similar to a journal article maybe, but comes sort of has sort of slightly lesser status depending on who is judging the status of the work. And we can talk more later on if it crops up about kind of status of work and how that's, or not necessarily how it's calculated, but how certain kinds of publications are valued by institutions, etc. And then publishing books. Hayden mentioned I've published, I think 15 or so books at this point. I didn't write most of those, in my defense. Most of those are edited collections. One of my favorite things to do, it turns out, is gather essays from brilliant people and put them all into a collection and sort of publish a book on a theme. I love doing this. It's one of my favorite pastimes. It's also very time consuming and exhausting, but incredibly rewarding. So again, more on these things later, hopefully. All right. Oh, and there are, of course, I said there were two kinds, but then remember there are actually three. So there are these kind of hybrid peer-reviewed, not so peer-reviewed things in the middle, such as encyclopedia articles. People have invited me in the past to write articles for encyclopedias. And they're sort of peer-reviewed in the sense that they're reviewed by an editor, but they're not. I mean, I was invited to write some articles about drummers, for instance, for the Grove Dictionary of American Music. And I don't know, I don't think any other drum scholars necessarily checked the accuracy of my entries, but they were also, there was a review process by the editor. So somewhere in the middle there were these kind of things. That was sort of an exciting and terrifying experience writing for an encyclopedia because, growing up, I turned to encyclopedias to find out about things. And now I'm writing the entries for them. So there's a lot of pressure to get things right. And because I think this is published every 10 or 20 years, maybe every 25 years, infrequently anyway. So I felt like I had to sort of get it right, if not for all time, for a good while. Okay. Oh yeah, another example of sort of hybrid is JPME. It wouldn't italicize, unfortunately, today. But anyway, the Journal of Popular Music Education, which, as Hayden mentioned, is a journal I founded. It's the journal I founded. I don't found very many. And we instituted a kind of article called Practices and Perspectives. This came about, actually. We had a submission during the second year of the journal back in 2018. An English professor sent us 10,000 words of brilliant prose, all about his side gig teaching harmonica online. And he he said, maybe you'd be interested to publish this piece. I have absolutely no interest in undertaking any revisions to the article at all. So that seemed like a kind of curious request. I mean, you're kind of like, well, this is like it was brilliantly written. It had no citations in it at all, which is sort of a red flag for scholarly publication, you know. So we couldn't send it out for peer review because it would have got rejected. But it was a brilliant piece of writing with a really fabulous insight into teaching harmonica online. And it was expertly written because it was by an English professor who really knew how to write. So we created a new section in the journal called Practices and Perspectives, where we often publish articles that are really interesting, but wouldn't sort of pass the criteria or the sort of pass the benchmark for peer review as such. So there are these kind of hybrid opportunities. And also there are practitioner journals in the US. We have these, the Music Educators Journal and the Journal of General Music Education, which are, again, it's sort of scholarship because they are peer reviewed, but it's also, the articles are shorter and tend to not have the same rigorousness of review as a full sort of peer-reviewed article. That being said, the most rigorous peer review process I've ever been through was for a practitioner journal. So it's a little bit confusing. But anyway, the point is there's a kind of range of peer-reviewed and non-peer-reviewed publication opportunities out there. So why would we be interested in academic publications? Well, a range of reasons. Some people may be laboring under the misapprehension that there's money in it. There's definitely a lot of money involved in academic publishing, but none of it, or very little of it, will come to anyone doing the writing. That I can guarantee you. So if you're thinking, I will turn my PhD thesis or dissertation into a book and rake in millions of dollars, I am sorry to advise you that won't be happening. I published, I think, 6 or 7 books with Routledge over the years, and my total royalty check last year we sold quite a few last year. I think my total royalty check was something like $80. So maybe it's enough to go out for dinner, but after tax, you know. Anyway, so not the money, but again, there is a lot of money in the publishing industry. Oxford University Press, for instance, has offices in a wealthy part of downtown Manhattan, Midtown Manhattan. If anyone's interested in a slightly what's the word I'm looking for? Well, it's a kind of biased, but I can't remember the word I'm looking for. Anyway, worth checking out this movie, Paywall: The Business of Scholarship, which presents a kind of negative image of the scientific academic community publishing world. It's a little bit harsh, but it's not, and not quite as bad as it seems in this movie in the music education world. But nonetheless, it kind of helps sort of create a sort of sense of how that business works, if you're interested. So as graduate students, you may have been, or as students, you may have been subject to advice such as this. Maybe there's pressure to write. I enjoy the pressure to write, except when I don't have time to write, then it's confusing. But anyway, so being students, it's important to write sometimes, depending on what you're up to. So another reason to write is you just can't help yourself. You have something to say. I find I have plenty to say, and I love to write it down. So I'm going to be writing anyway. So if I can get it published, all the better. Certainly for me, it feels good to have something out. And my mother likes to receive my publications, you know. She sometimes even reads them and always says things like, I didn't understand it, but it seems very clever. So that's kind of nice. You know. Writing it's a fabulous way to share ideas and knowledge and insights, etc. You know, I mentioned earlier that I live with ADHD, which is its whole own journey. But I find in meetings I'm terrible. I can never think what to say in the moment. But writing means I can come back to something the next day or the next week or the next month and iterate ideas over time. You know, it's a really, really wonderful way to share ideas, kind of in slow motion almost, to get one's ideas together. And it means we can reach people we couldn't reach, you know, without the writing. Importantly, scholarly prose is the currency of our profession. So if we want to progress as scholars in music education, it's important to publish academic writing. I am in the process of applying for promotion at my institution, and there's an awful lot of focus on how much I've written, where I've written it, who's published it, etc., etc. No one's interested. That's not quite true. They are much, 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 much vanishingly less interested in, for instance, if I have a podcast. We need to publish scholarly prose, and this varies by location and institution, but it's really important to publish stuff to progress as a scholar. So yeah, for promotion, for tenure, for reappointment, for hiring decisions, if you're looking to apply for a job, if you have publications, this can help. So it's competitive in that regard. Google Scholar citation counts. This is, again, no one's really trying to be competitive in our field, except everybody is all the time. We like to collaborate with each other, but also when we're measuring one another, there's kind of a competition that creeps in. And as part of my promotion process, they're interested in my Google Scholar count. I've also been asked or advised to remove all of the times that I've cited myself. So I'm hoping that by the time I finish taking out self-citations, I still have a count left. Anyway, so yeah, as I said, music education academia is competitive. It's a market. There are more applicants than there are jobs, and publishing and publishing in the right places, whatever that means for you, is or can be important. Yeah, which is strange because it's also a kind of collaborative and compassionate place. But productivity matters, I think the most important thing is inspiration when it comes to writing. This is kind of cheesy to say, but goodness me, it's hard to write things if you don't care about them. So as I said, I'm sort of gifted with this curse of needing to write all the time. But I certainly find it hard to write about things about which I'm not inspired. So this is vital. Okay, yeah, writing can be a wonderful way to think. And that may not come intuitively to people who don't write a lot, but I certainly find that I think while I write, it helps me to think, like it helps slow my brain down in some ways. So there's a quote that's sort of attributed to various famous writers, from Hemingway to Thompson. People, what is it, to say, I don't know what I think till I've written it down, so maybe that's helpful. And it can help us learn. I've never written anything and not learned something in the process, usually rather a lot about myself, about the field, about others. And I think, as students, I certainly consider myself a lifelong student, always here to learn, right? Academia certainly keeps us humble. And it's a vigorous part of doing the research. I think sometimes there can be a misconception that maybe people do research and then write it down. And that happens, but also writing is a absolutely essential part of a lot of research processes, especially, for instance, doing autoethnographic work. And if you're doing action research, philosophizing, really any kinds of research, it's important to keep writing while we're doing the research. So yeah, it's a vital part of the research. So I would encourage you to write, and the more writing you do, the more practiced you become at that, and hopefully the better it becomes. I also find that writing is a great excuse to do something else, like I mentioned, easily distracted. But in all seriousness, I find my kind of creating happens when I'm not sitting at a laptop. Writing does help me get my ideas down, but also I need to go for walks in the woods. For instance, this was me, I think, last week. It was freezing, but delightful. So I came back from this walk and found my head was full of wonderful ideas. Well, actually, most of the ideas were there while I was walking, and then they disappeared by the time I got back. But it was too cold to take my phone out and leave myself a voice message. Anyway, do other things if you're trying to write. Movement can help, I find. Playing the drums is a welcome distraction from writing. So I find doing something that isn't writing helps me come back to the writing. And then once I've finished whatever vigorous movement I was doing, I'm suddenly able to pour things into the laptop. So also this is, I also like to set up Felicity, our resident octopus in the apartment. She's modeling here how helpful it can be to call a friend and discuss our research. She's finished her coffee by the look of it. Anyway, yeah, talking with people about writing is really important. As I'll mention later on, publishing is never a solo project. So where should we be looking to publish, or where can one publish? Speaking of where, this is a picture of Boston, by the way, and the Boston University, the background here, the Boston University College of Fine Arts is right in the middle at the bottom. It used to be a car dealership, hence the car dealership look of that rectangular building. Anyway, a good place to publish is in, I mentioned edited books earlier. So being part of something like the ISME Student Forum means you're in touch with lots of people who may have connections, who will have connections to others in the profession and to maybe some of the people you know in the forum may be editing a book, may know someone who's editing a book, putting a collection together. Maybe there's a call for papers that you've seen on an email list somewhere. Maybe there's something in a Facebook group. So if someone's editing a book about something exciting and or meaningful to you, maybe you can get a chapter in the book. Sometimes there's a call for papers, sometimes there's an email invitation, sometimes it's just a conversation at the bar, and then you have to submit your chapter after you've written it. So I think that of this sometimes in terms of, for me, there's often a musical metaphor to things. Whose album do I want to play on? There are only, I've published quite a lot of book chapters, but they're only in books that I have where I feel like I have something to say. And these are often less well regarded than journal articles. But I've written lots of book chapters because I really like to write with, for, and alongside people, who I like and who are doing stuff I care about. So I find it really hard to write on stuff that I'm not invested in. So if there's a book coming out, for instance, I've got something coming out in the forthcoming Oxford Handbook of Feminism in Music Education, and I know the editors of that book, and there was surprised and humbled by their invitation, and it was a really good collaboration. So I like to work with people I like to work with. It's also important to think about where your employer may wish you to publish. For instance, at Boston University, where I am, I know that the dean, if I'm publishing a book, he would prefer that that comes out on a university press, like Oxford University Press, as opposed to, for instance, Intellect or Bloomsbury, which are not university presses. So also maybe your sense of self requires that you publish something in the top journal in your field, whatever you've decided that is. Or you want to publish something in a national journal or a regional journal or something. So also it's important to think, what will enable you to learn the most in the process. I've sometimes published book chapters rather, or books even, where I found the topic really challenging, but I think it's an area I really would like to grow in. And the opportunity to write is then an opportunity to read a ton of stuff I might not take the time to read otherwise to inform my own writing process. So think about, how will your writing make the most impact? And this can mean many things, right? How could it impact the profession? How could it impact teachers? Maybe you want to impact teachers locally. Maybe you want to impact policy decisions nationally. Maybe you want to impact an international discussion about something. Cynically, I would say that academic publishing is a terrible way to make an impact because so few people have access to the stuff we publish. And this is kind of an unfortunate facet of the academic publishing world. If things are often behind a paywall, hence the name of that movie I mentioned earlier on, and many people can't access it. So if you want to make an impact, for instance, on public policy, maybe publishing in an academic journal isn't really going to help anybody in the government see what you've written. At the same time, if you want to make an impact on your own career and your university requires you to publish in peer-reviewed journals behind a paywall, maybe it makes the most sense to focus on that instead. And maybe you can do both, right? But we only have so much time. But this is important. I think most people, I think, would like to think their writing is having some kind of impact. It has some sort of life beyond merely a publication. Like, it's cool to get something published, but it's more important maybe for it to have an impact. I remember when I was working in the UK, we had what was it called? The Research Excellence Framework, which was a peer-reviewed process nationwide. And people were trying to assess, like, what is the impact of the writing? And that was a really important part of evaluation of people's research, was how has it impacted something? Oh yeah. Another important conversation to have with oneself can be, I've been in this situation where I've submitted an article to a journal and it was rejected, and then the second journal and it was rejected, and a third journal. My record so far is 6. So sometimes that can be a case of, look, all right, I've written a thing, I just need to get it out, and maybe that's okay. So sometimes just getting the thing out is good. And actually, I ended up really pleased with the place that landed. It was exactly the right place for it. So as Hayden mentioned at the start when he kindly introduced me, I've co-founded this journal, the Journal of Popular Music Education, a handful of years ago now, 9 years ago. And this stemmed from a conversation I remember having at the annual general meeting of the British Journal of Music Education in London, and the editor, one of the editors at the time, we were having a conversation about writing about popular music education, and Regina Murphy said, "Where do people publish about popular music education?" Because it was sort of this at the time. It's certainly more commonplace now to write about this, but it seemed that music education journals weren't that interested in popular music education, and popular music studies journals weren't that interested in anything about education. And it seemed this kind of like middle ground. So I'm not sure the only answer was to start my own journal, but the journal survived this long that it seems like it's a healthy space. So sometimes, maybe the answer to where do I publish is somewhere that doesn't exist yet, because there's not a space for that conversation. So the outlier from the W's in my subtitle is how to publish. So kind of a very brief excursion through how to publish things. I'm gonna focus on journal article submission because there's so many other kinds of publication, but I'll just briefly walk you through some aspects of this. Study the genre, the style. I like music metaphors. But academic publishing, academic writing, scholarly writing is a very stylized and very particular kind of writing. So if you write in sort of the wrong style, the style that doesn't fit, then it's going to get rejected from journals. So read articles, if you want to submit to a particular journal, familiarize yourself with the kind of tone of that journal, the style of the writing in there, and submit something of a like style. Really important. And then you write your thing, which can take, an afternoon or months or years. And then you send it in. A little bit more on this in a minute. And then, oh yeah, the peer review process. So the peer review process, I have lots of things to say about this, but it's really about the suitability and fit of the thing you've written for the particular thing you've submitted it to. As I have to remind myself every single time I get reviews back from an article or book chapter submission, it is not about my value as a member of the species. It feels like a condemnation of my soul, if no one accepts my work first time. Incidentally, my work has never been accepted first time to anything, never, ever, ever. I always grow in the peer review process, and sometimes it can take me weeks or months actually to open emails with peer reviews. I think my record is 2 months when I'd poured my heart and soul into a publication and could not face the peer reviews. I did it, but anyway, so that's a whole thing. So this is the not particularly exciting homepage of the Journal of Popular Music Education. All journals have a homepage a little like this, maybe. You'll see at the bottom, there's a tab that says Submit. Before you submit, as I mentioned, it's worth studying the kind of genre of the genre in which we're writing here. And all the journals will have, if you're not familiar with this already, all academic journals will have this is on the aims and scope page. So it tells us what the aims of the journal are. And next to that tab, there's an aims and scope tab at the bottom, and then a call for papers. Calls for papers, we have a few. So look at the call for papers. Maybe it tells you, people put a lot of time and energy into calls for papers. So it should tell you a lot of really detailed information about what people would like to see in the journal. And then you can see who's on the editorial board. Maybe that's helpful. What kind of things do you know about those people's research? What might they be looking for? And the content tab all the way over on the far right, that's where you can access, again, if you have access behind the paywall, where you can access the content to see what kind of style you should be writing in. But yeah, always familiarize yourself with what the journal is after. And then you just hurry up and wait, in the words of Debbie Harry and Blondie. We wait for many things. I just got an email this morning reminding me that I have yet to complete the peer review of an article I think I was supposed to have done already. It takes a long time to do a peer review well. And, we are generally people who care about our work in the profession and you take it very seriously and want to support one another. And I want to be wide awake when I'm doing these things so I can bring my best self to the work. As an editor of a journal, I have submissions coming in all the time and have to get to them and see what they are and send them out for review. I invite reviewers. Some people say no, then I have to send them back. So we wait. As authors, we spend a lot of time waiting. And that's a real thing, but it's part of the process. Okie dokie. So a little bit about peer review. double-blind review. So this is when the writer doesn't know who the reviewers are, and the reviewers don't know who the writer is. That's important. It's sort of the gold standard in terms of scientific research, you know. It helps us be objective, apparently. Although none of us is ever going to be objective about anything, are we really? So, like I said, I like to feel like I'm in a band. I like to feel like I'm making music with people and publish things with people I know and share a kind of like-mindedness with. So, I put Frontiers Journal on here for a few reasons. Frontiers is one of few, I think at the moment, journals where you can see who the reviewers are. Authors can see who's reviewing their work, and reviewers can see whose work they are reviewing, which is kind of cool. Maybe it helps us be a little kinder in our reviews. But it obviously removes that anonymity and help, you know, I think it sort of exposes in a way the sort of myth of objectivity, if you will. There are, you know, pros and cons to blind review, of course. But another thing I wanted to mention about Frontiers, Frontiers, all the stuff on all the publications on the Frontiers Journal's website are free to access. But it is not free to publish in Frontiers. So whereas in most instances, one has to pay to access the content. In here, you have to pay to publish. I'm very fortunate to be at a university that has a voluminous library, and I can request access to anything for free. Also, I published something in Frontiers, and my university was quite happy to pay the $2,000 I needed to pay to get the article into the journal. Not everyone's in that position, and for most of my career, I have not been. So I understand this is complex and challenging. My point at the bottom here about reviewers, this is, I think, you know, sometimes it can feel, I feel this too, actually, as a writer, it can feel like this kind of a, maybe people are trying to keep us out of the journals, you know. But reviewers, reviewing and editing, I've said it's a critical pedagogical collaboration here, in that it's really a discussion. You know, when I'm reviewing things, I'm there to learn. This is most of the reading I do actually is as a reviewer and an editor and as a teacher. So I think it's maybe helpful or healthy to think of the review process as one in which we send our work in and people send us constructive comments and feedback. Sometimes there can be some exasperated comments, but there's usually the feedback is constructive and helpful, and you know, it's designed to help. Yeah, there is a little bit of policing. You know, there's certain things we have to be careful to say or not to say. But mostly it's about collaboration and helping each other grow and do better as scholars. Becoming aware of the time here that I'm taking a while. I mentioned that I'm in the Oxford Handbook of Feminism in Music Education, Feminism and Music Education. So, and Marissa Silverman and Nassim Nicknafs are editors of this book, and I have a huge amount of respect for both of those editors as colleagues, and working with them has been tremendous. I wrote what I felt was a sort of fairly vulnerable piece of writing, and they were really supportive in, well, first of all, encouraging me to write for the publication at all, but helping me kind of navigate literature I hadn't thought about. And anyway, it was I'm really glad I accepted the invitation to write for that book, because it was a really wonderful collaboration. So I wish for you all to have similar experiences. This doesn't have a book cover yet, but it will be a book. Improvisation as Liberatory Praxis in Popular Music Education is a book that I've just, well, I haven't quite finished editing it, but it's in the production process. Zach Moyer and I put this together. And I learned so much in this process. Even writing the proposal for the book, Zach Moyer and I were really learning from each other about different literature we hadn't read and different ideas we hadn't come across. We had this idea that improvisation was important, and that liberatory praxis as a sort of component of critical pedagogy was important, but coming from different places and different times. Anyway, we both learned so much, and we learned so much from all of the authors. Tremendous process. So I really encourage you all to be involved in collaborative writing, where you know the people you're working with. It's also possible in blind review to learn a lot from one another, of course. Just a brief example here of how subjective peer review is. I submitted an article for publication in the International Journal of Education and the Arts a handful of years ago, and I was very proud of myself, as I always am when I submit a publication. I'd done a lot of work, and it was an autoethnographic piece. And one of the reviewers came back and said, if this is autoethnography, you have to remove really all of the citations. Otherwise, it's not autoethnographic. You're leaning on too much scholarship. Take it all out. And I was aghast and sort of thought, well, how can it be scholarship if I'm just kind of, it's essentially just a blog post at that point, not to diss blog posts, but it didn't seem very scholarly. Um, so I ended up gutting the paper of most of the scholarly citations, which kind of felt really dangerous at the time. But it was published in the journal, and then I submitted the same article. It kind of spread throughout a book that Philosophy of Playing Drum Kit, that came out a couple of years later, and the feedback I got from the editor of that book series was that it actually needed way more citations. He was like, you say this is autoethnography, but where's the method? There's no rigor to this. Why have you not got any citations?" And I was thinking, well, I did have citations, but I was advised previously to take them all out. So I did. So horses for courses, and I was happy to go and do some more reading, and encountered some literature that I've used in a bunch of other places since. So there is no kind of definitive right or wrong. It's what was good for the International Journal of Education and the Arts in this particular instance, where a particular reviewer had a particular axe to grind, was not suitable for the Cambridge Elements series of 21st century music practice. So with whom should we seek to write and publish? Not alone. There's a kind of, actually, the chapter that I have in the Oxford Handbook of Feminism and Music Education sort of I sought to dismantle some of the myth about solo authorship. It's not really a thing. It's impossible. There we go. Dust to show it. So I say there's no such thing as a solo author publication, because whenever we write anything, we're informed by literature, right? Which is our friends and peers. The literature we're reading is written by people in the same profession as us. So it's already a collaboration, which is why we use citations, to show that we're collaborating with people. Our research participants, even though they may be anonymized, and pre-reviewers, if you're submitting something for academic publication, please, I urge you to share with a friend or multiple friends, or with your partner, with colleagues. It's really important. And in no way devalues the effort you put in. It's not like it's a lesser piece because we've collaborated. We have to collaborate, everybody does. Editors, you submit something to a journal or to a book, and the editor or editors will read the article before they even decide to send it out for peer review. So there's already a collaboration there, right? And then peer reviewers, as I mentioned, there's a collaboration there. They'll provide comments to you, and we are asked to address the comments of the reviewers. That doesn't mean you have to do everything they say. It means you have to address the comment by thinking, well, do I need to do what they're saying? Have they misconstrued something here? How can I best take their advice on board? And with copy editors as well, this is when you send the article's finished and you send it to people to correct the sort of punctuation and formatting for print. And I've had people take out my punctuation before, or rearrange a sentence, and I'm like, no, I was right the first time, because it means something different. So at this point, there's a collaboration as well, and typesetters, and with students. Oh my goodness, I have so many opportunities in my job now to review my writing with my students. They're very generous in that regard. And most of the things I write, I've already sort of practiced out loud in different ways with students. So anyway, it's always a collaboration. So I would just urge you all to embrace the fact that it's collaborative, even though our profession likes to kind of prize, in particular, the sort of solo author publication for our CVs. Here are some of the people I've collaborated with. Zach Moyer in the top left. I mentioned him already in our collaboration. We also make music together, which is beautiful. Alexis Callio next to him. Alexis has a habit of really challenging my thinking and pushing me to do more and read deeper and really question my assumptions. And Ostina Lee next to her, she and I also make music together, and she helps me think a lot more about students and compassion and trying to be more loving in the work. And David Knapp next to Ostina, he's a rigorous methodologist and really kind of held my feet to the fire with helping ensure that I was being methodologically rigorous in my writing. Bottom left, Christopher Chiari, they have really helped me consider broader perspectives in my writing and the kind of narrowness of my own lens, really. And Yeah, and also help embrace sort of value of personal perspective, and but that everybody has a personal perspective, right? So we need to kind of recognize the breadth of individual perspectives. And Hildegard, next to Chris, Hildegard and I put a book out together. She very generously invited me to co-author with her the second edition of her book, Sociology for Music Teachers. And I learned so much from Hildegard because she studied sociology for decades before I'd even heard of it. I learned so much from her. And Brian Powell in the middle at the bottom. He and I founded the Journal of Popular Music Education together. I think he's probably my most frequent collaborator in writing, and we're really good friends, which is a great start, and learn a lot from each other. And there's a lot of sort of to and fro. He always misses the things that I see, and I always miss the things that he sees, etc. And next to Brian is Pam Bernard at the University of Cambridge in England. She has been a wonderful supporter throughout my career. Kind of a mentor really, helping me understand and see the value of my work. I think, saying that helping me understand I have something to say, which is, I wasn't really sure I did. And Nassim Nicknaffs there on the bottom right, as I mentioned, she's the editor of one of the editors with Marissa Silverman of the Oxford Handbook of Feminism and Music Education. And Nassim always helps me read more and think harder and be provocative. She's a really provocative writer, which is inspiring. So anyway, some of my collaborators, and hopefully, everyone can find uh, a diverse and exciting and vigorous team of collaborators, in our lives. So that's everything I had to say this morning. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions, thoughts, comments from anyone. First of all, again, thank you so much for letting me talk far too quickly. I appreciate it. I'm sorry for talking so fast. I'm trying to slow down. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gareth. Wonderfully insightful. You've done the marvelous task of it being many hours past my bedtime. It's almost 10 to 1 a.m. here in Australia. And I've fully engaged the entire time, and I expected nothing less. So thanks so much for your time, Gareth. Means the absolute world. I'm free to field any. It looks like we've already got some hands up here. How about I start with Mimi? I see your hand is up, sitting there. You're the first person. Oh no, that's a clapping. Pardon me, Mimi.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
just want to show my
It's
appreciation and
all good.
I'm
It's
really
two hands up. That's even better.
and it's really helpful. I think it's for especially for young researcher all around the world. I think they have there are some significant for them to refer to for their professional journey. Thank you. I just want to
Well,
say
look, thank you for saying that. I think it is a journey, right? And
yeah,
I've been publishing quite a lot for like quite a while, and I feel like I'm very
yeah.
much still on the journey. It's. I think if we submit ourselves to the process of learning and growing, it can be really exciting. It's certainly challenging, but it really feels like a journey. So thank you for saying that.
It's really worth to sharing this kind of experience to the young researcher.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mimi. And yes, it's truly valuable to anybody, no matter the corner of the planet they find themselves in. Veronica, you've had your hand up, your digital hand up patiently. Please ask away.
Thank you, Gareth, for this wonderful presentation. I just feel so, supported, and yeah, I really want to write. But I have a lot of questions. What do you think about publication pressure in music education? And do you ever have imposter feelings? Because it doesn't seem so.
Oh my goodness. Yes, I have imposter syndrome quite badly. I actually gave a talk about that in September for my university, which was sort of ironic in a sense, sort of feeling like I had the positionality to talk about the thing about not having the positionality or something. But yes, because I think it can feel when we read publications, this is important to remember, right? That anything that's published has been through one, two, three, four rounds of peer review and pre-review, and it's the end result of sort of years often of work. But that's the only thing we see. We don't get to see all the drafts. So whenever I'm reading anyone's work, it's this polished and brilliant writing, and I'm like, oh my God, my thoughts are a mess. I can't. I feel like I'm nowhere near that. So I think it's it's sort of baked in that we're going to feel imposter syndrome, right? Because the things we're reading, the things we're encountering look so good. but and none of our work is until it's finished, and it's so it's kind of like it's hard to sort of separate the product from the process maybe, and the academic pressure, the writing pressure. I think there is pressure to write, and again, this is different in different places. So maybe ironically, when I was working in London, I had no obligation to publish in my job. And in fact, they would have preferred that I didn't a lot of the time because it was seen as a distraction. But in a way, that freed me up to write a lot because I could do whatever I wanted, no, it didn't matter. Whereas now I have to publish. I absolutely have to publish because I'm paid. Part of my salary is predicated on I will produce work. So I sort of feel more pressure to publish now, which in a way makes it harder because I've sort of lost the kind of freedom in a sense. And in a way, it makes it easier too because I can decide to take a Wednesday to write something because I absolutely have to. But it also means it's an interesting kind of relationship. There's definitely pressure, but depending on the kind of job we get, different people have different kind of pressures. And also the place I worked in London, they actually, having said they didn't want me to write, that's not quite true. I got to publish a monthly article in a national drum magazine, nothing to do with research, and they loved it because it was an advertisement for the school that one of their teachers was writing in this magazine. That was frightening because I used to write this thing. I used to write 1,500 words, send it off to the editor, and it would be printed the next week. It was like horrifying. Whereas, with academic publishing, you write something, send it in, and it's maybe a year or 2 years till it comes out after this whole process. The imposter syndrome, absolutely. I think everyone has that. And maybe if you don't have it, that's kind of a worry, right? Because I think it kind of speaks to, like I said, I think this academia keeps us humble because there are brilliant people. Like it's once you start doing a doctorate and you start publishing things, everyone around you is brilliant. These are all really smart people who've done really well at school, and oh my goodness, my peers are intimidating.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Veronica. Gareth, I had a question in the chat pop up. I'll repost it in the chat. If you want to open it up, you can give it a read as well. This is from Narissa. And Narissa's asked what your advice is when it comes to sharing published pieces on websites such as your ResearchGates and academia.edu or YouTube updates in order to expand your reach beyond simply the academic audience. I'm sure you have thoughts on this here.
So long as this isn't being recorded, no, joking. It's fine. So yeah, so I have a very limited understanding of copyright law, which is probably a character flaw. But yeah, I know with my journal, for instance, the Journal of Popular Music Education, they ask they ask that if someone wants to put something on their personal website or academia.edu or ResearchGate, whatever, that they wait 1 year until it's been published in the journal. And then after that, there's a kind of like a common sense understanding that sure, it's public domain, whatever. And or the other thing is you can publish the content of the article, but not the kind of formatted thing that they spent a lot of time and energy doing. So maybe you can publish, yeah, like a Word version of it. But honestly, this is a very kind of privileged sort of situation to be in, but I grew up without a lot of money and kind of have this, I have a kind of unhealthy, probably antagonism towards institutions. So like Oxford University Press, for example, I'm not allowed to put the stuff I've written for them on a website, the formatted version, because it's their, like they own that. But at the same time, I'm like, really? You have offices on Madison Avenue in New York City. Like, clearly one of us is making more money than the other. And I just put my stuff on the website. And you know what Oxford University Press aren't doing? Is that they're not sending the cops around to like have me take down my article. Like they haven't got that, no one cares that much about music education, or my writing. So my attitude, unhealthy or whatever, is just I just put stuff on my website. But that's not because of an antagonism toward institutions. It's informed by that. The reason I do it is because I want people to be able to read it. I don't mind if you don't read it, but I always put my stuff on academia.edu. I have a note in my calendar every month to update my academia.edu. So I put stuff on there, and I get lots of requests through ResearchGate from students asking me to send them something, and I always send it. I find the PDF, and if I can't find the PDF, I'll find the Word version. And every single time I send it off, without a regard for the copyright. And maybe it'll come back to bite me, but I don't think so. I think it's understood that I don't know. It's kind of a grey area. Like it's illegal, but it's a choice I've made because I think it's more important to share the knowledge or share the research. Part of it also selfishly is I'd like people to cite my work, but more honestly, more of it's just about I would prefer for people to have access to it, and it feels kind of morally wrong that people can't access the writing. So. But at the same time, this is sorry, I'll stop talking about this in a minute. But I know when we started the Journal of Popular Music Education, this is a real conundrum, because when Brian Powell and I started the journal, we actually started working towards the journal. Although it didn't come out till 2017, we started working towards it in 2014, and we were pretty fresh. We just got our doctorates, starting in the field, and we thought, well, if we're trying to get anywhere in the profession, we want like a printed journal, with a real publisher. So Intellect was really good. They've done a great job for us, and it's a legitimate publisher. And they do a load of work for us as well. There's a copy editing team, there's a formatting team, advertising team, marketing team. It's brilliant. Whereas we had pushback from peers who said, well, listen, if you're doing this if you're writing about popular music, surely you should be like embracing the democratic, informal ethos of it. Why not just publish it online and make it free access? And part of the reason is because that involves a crap ton more free labor. Someone's got to format it and put it up there and maintain it and market it. Another one is I'd like to get a proper job one day. And if I'm publishing basically a blog, that doesn't look as good on my CV as having. So there's it's a little bit messed up, honestly. Like the content would have been the same, but I think also more people have submitted to the journal because it's a real thing than they would have done if it was a blog. So it's a kind of anyway. It's complicated. I mean, you have to think it's everyone has to make their kind of own decisions about this, but it's a complicated, complex ecosystem, I suppose.
Yeah, there are a number of comments when you were talking about access and the paywalls behind or in front of rather the entire academic knowledge base. There are a lot of comments coming through. Some people saying that it's without institutions, it can be almost impossible to for people, particularly with from say currencies that aren't quite as strong, it'd be almost impossible to get something open access without that support. So
of course, no.
the fact you're doing that is marvelous for us.
Well, no, it's wrong, but also, I mean, again, like publishing with Intellect or Oxford University Press, whatever, they've got staff. I mean, I don't get paid specifically. Well, actually, Oxford University Press sometimes does give a small advance to authors, but we're not getting paid for the publications. But they have a huge staff of people who are being paid to copy edit and do. So it's an industry, And I know in the UK when I was there was a big push to get things published open access, and that was valued more because in the UK the universities are much more funded by the public. Boston University, where I am now, is a private university. So in a public university, if taxpayers are paying for my salary, essentially, maybe they have a right to see the stuff I'm making. So maybe it's if they have to pay for my salary and then pay to access it, that's insane. Whereas at BEU, it's kind of like, well, Boston University is paying for me to do it. So maybe they're the only ones who need to see. I don't know, but it's so. Anyway, yes.
A very small problem to fix, I'm sure. I'm sure someone in this room will fix it in their time. Who knows?
It's my spring
Gareth,
break
we had
this week.
another.
I can do it now, actually, yeah.
Yeah. What are you doing tomorrow? Let's note it down. We had another question for Marianne, who is here, and she asked I'll post it in the chat for you to see if you need to. The age-old question that I somehow keep hearing all sorts of new perspectives on, but for people wanting to publish work from their own theses, whether that's masters or doctorates, and there's an addendum here where you may or may not be attached to an academic environment institution, but want to stay in it. And Marianne, I assume you're meaning you may be graduating from said degree. You may not have that same relationship. That this probably comes into the private and public university discussion as well. Gareth, do you have any guidance?
Sorry, I missed the question. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. I think I rambled on. First half of the question, do you have any advice for people looking to publish work from their master's or doctoral theses after finishing? Second half adds where you may or may not be attached to an academic environment or institution, but want to stay within it.
So, yeah, I mean, one piece of advice is to have a cup of tea and take a year off and just relax, because finishing a PhD is hard work and you deserve some time off. Also, that's not what I did, um, because you've got to put a roof over our heads. So, um, yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? I think there's no need to publish anything, right? That depend, there's no like uh obligation to oneself necessarily, or no one you don't owe anyone publishing your work. That being said, if you want to try and get a job in academia, it's definitely helpful to get stuff out. So one of the good things about double-blind peer review is that no one knows what they're reading or who sent it in, what institution they're attached to. It's only, supposed to be on the merit of the publication, of the manuscript rather. So I can't tell if you're working at a university or you're a graduate student or whatever. It's just a piece of writing. So you have absolute freedom to submit some work, and it will be judged on the merit of the work and the engaged with as such. So I'm not sure if this is helpful advice or not, but please submit stuff. Look for the journals, engage in conversations, and again, because I mean, people are trying to collaborate anyway. Like, I want people to publish in my journal, partly because I want to keep the journal alive, but more than that, what keeps the journal alive is people publishing in it. So I really, really like helping people improve their writing. It's a very niche skill, but I'm good at it. And people who edit journals are also people with this kind of nerdy, geeky skill set. We just want to help people with their writing, and we're good at it, which is why we're put in charge of editing journals. So I'm not sure if this was embedded in the question at all, but I think have the confidence, to send your writing places. And part of the peer review process is helping you kind of figure out what bits of it to take out, leave in, amend, etc. Yeah, and in terms of I'm not quite sure. I think it'll help that helps you stay relevant. I think it helps people stay or be seen as relevant. We're always as relevant, but I think it helps other people see the work if we get it out there. So I'm not sure how helpful. I'm not sure how helpful that is, but that's my top of mind thoughts about it. But please submit away, send away. We're all peers.
Wonderful. Well, that's the point of peer review, isn't it? We're all one another's peers. I might be cheeky. I might ask my own question, and mainly because you're from a background that I might benefit from this from, being English as a first language. And
Yeah.
I understand this may not be relevant to those where English is not your first language, but I'm curious about, aside from the advice of write a lot, do you have any guidance about simply improving your writing? Because I'm always feeling like I'm right at the edge of it. And as a result, I think I'm improving, but of course, there's the imposter syndrome side of it as well. What guidance do you have about just improving your writing in general, perhaps both as a English as a first language, and also many of your students, I'm sure, have English as an additional language as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one's writing improves the more one does it. So maybe it's hard to see the improvements from time to time. So doing more of it is good. Something I was going to say earlier actually and forgot. I mentioned, I have ADHD, which is a whole lot of fun. It enables me to focus really hard on a project. What I can't do, which I know some colleagues do, is they say, I will write 500 words every day. And they just have a practice. They get up at whatever time, and the first thing they do from 6 to 7 is they write 500 words. And I'm like, that's insane. I can't imagine a life where I do that. But I've tried it. I can't do it. But maybe that's the thing. Like doing it often, like doing a little bit every day, can be good. And I think for me, one of the things I like about writing is I want it to groove. I want the writing to feel good. I like my sentences to have a lilt and a flow and a kind of, and I don't know, maybe other people don't really care, but that's how I like the writing to kind of feel like it's got a rhythm to it. And maybe that's important. I think something here's some advice about writing an article or structuring an article. I edit and review a lot of work, and often I think the main criticism I have for people's work, this is a kind of big criticism, like a broad criticism, is kind of logical presentation of ideas. And as a writer, this is hard. This is why I say I'm better in writing, right? And I'm feeling this right now, that I could probably write you better advice than I can say about this. But I think the hardest thing when I'm reviewing an article, I start at the top of the article with the title and I read straight to the bottom of it. and I want it to make sense. I want to understand why the first thing comes first, and in the middle, if there's like this sudden aside about something, I'm like, why is this here? You were talking about something else. So that's the hardest thing to get right, I think, for me anyway. Is I know apparently for lots of other writers, the hardest thing to get right is presenting things in a way that's logical to the reader. Because the way we think and the way we write are probably not the way that other people need to see the presentation of the argument. And part of that's a formal thing, like a kind of formalistic like stylistic expectation of, you know, do the introduction and then we do the literature review and then we do the methods. But there's a reason for that, because if you did the introduction at the end, I wouldn't know why there's a method. Like you know, so some of those conventional things are helpful. But I think think about structure. Maybe it helps to have headings. If you have an outline of headings, what are you going to put under each one? And then some subheadings. And if you find you've got a heading, another heading, and then you've got like 8 subheadings, that should be a red flag, because by the time you've got to more than 3 subheadings, it's probably a whole other article. So I think so. Structure, I think, like, is structure and organization is the biggest thing to work on. Stuff like I don't know, punctuation is important, right? But I think that kind of feels almost like window dressing, not quite window dressing, but that's less important than the organization of ideas. And something that sits uncomfortably with me is like I'm really good at writing. I'm really, really, really good at writing, but only in the English language and only in a very kind of narrow band of expertise. So it kind of sits uncomfortably with me that a big part of my job, I mentioned that peer review isn't like policing, but I feel like what I'm doing a lot of the time is policing the English language. And there are reasons for that. Like it's kind of the lingua franca of academia in our field, but it's also really exclusive. And it's unhelpful to kind of keep people out because they can't do the thing I do well. So I'm trying to strike a balance. And it's definitely always an ongoing effort, and goodness knows I need to try harder. But trying to strike a balance of hearing people's voices, hearing what they've got to say, and also presenting it in a way that's acceptable to the people I expect to be reading it. And there's a kind of balance to be had there. So, yeah. It's tricky, but I don't know. That wasn't your. Oh, you asked a bit about people writing for whom English isn't their first language. I can only write in English, and I have the hugest respect for anyone writing in a language that isn't their first one. But yeah, I think there's a kind of there are lots of people I think in the profession right now who are keen to expand the access to publication for people who don't do it a lot, or don't kind of easily conform to the expectations. But then again, like I said, it's kind of, if you want to progress in the profession, there are certain kind of you can call them standards if you like, but maybe they're just sort of benchmarks or expectations. So I'm going to stop talking because I feel like my answers are getting very long.
No, look, as the person who asked the question, I'm selfishly very appreciative, but everyone here is here to hear you talk. It doesn't make sense for you to do anything but that. So
Okay.
I appreciate it for one. We've got a question here from Seth Adams. First of all, Gareth, are you happy to keep going for a few more minutes? I understand we're a little bit over.
Absolutely. Yes, no, at 11:30 sharp, I'll need a cup of tea. But till then, good.
11:30, easy. We're nearing that time, I should say. We've got a question from Seth Adams. I'll pop it in the chat for you to read if you need to. Seth Adams asks, what are some topics/titles for edited volumes that you are currently considering or planning to put together? I suppose you might be asking for, you were mentioning reaching out to people who are wanting to publish in certain topics. So what things are you planning right now?
Well, I keep thinking that the one I've just finished is going to be my last one. And then, of course, I go for a walk and I'm suddenly like, oh my goodness, I have to publish this. So I'm interested, Ostina Lee and I are looking to work together on maybe doing an edited collection at some point about duo ethnography, which is exciting, I think. I said it's exciting in the least excited tone of voice imaginable. But anyway, duo ethnography in music education as a method and practice. I'm also looking at Zach Moyer, and I may be talking with Aidan Harvey about putting together a book about critical pedagogy in higher popular music education. It's always surprising to me how incredibly niche these book titles are, right? But you end up with 50 papers on like what seems like not a thing, and all of a sudden dozens of people have something to say about this topic. So yeah, definitely duo ethnography, I think, is really exciting to me. And I'm not sure exactly what, but I'm really interested in practice as research or practice research or practical musicology, whatever people are calling it. It's important to me to keep music in our scholarship. Even though that sort of seems impossible in a profession that so prizes words over music. What was the rest of this? Blah, 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 blah. Edited volumes. Yeah. So I think, yeah, critical pedagogy, I'm really interested in. I'm interested in hearing, like, because that's discursive and improvised, anything to do with improvisation, music making, critical pedagogy. And what I like about duo ethnography is it focuses on the process, and auto ethnography is about process. And I'm kind of obsessed with process. I like writing because I like writing. I mean, I like to have stuff out, but I really like the process. And I like drumming because I really like drumming. Like I like doing it. It's the doing of it that excites me. So I think something we overlook, again, I have a fairly high Google Scholar citation count and I've published a bunch, but that's less exciting to me as a human than the kind of doing of it, right? That's what I like. And so I'd like to kind of help. I want to publish things or curate things that help people focus on yeah, like enjoying and finding meaning in the process, because there can be so much focus on the output that I think, we don't want to lose sight of being human in the process. Also, I'm interested in things to do with nature and re-engaging with the world around us, because I spend far too long on a laptop. Present company accepted. I stare at a screen too long, so we have to remember that we're multidimensional humans. Yeah.
Wonderful. I think yes, spending too much time in front of a computer. The best advice I've been given is walk away. And sometimes I'm told at the moment, sometimes I have to remember it. But regardless, it's come your colleague, my supervisor, Julie Ballantyne, told me that some time ago. Just walk away when you have to. So
Yeah, no, that's
a
really,
qu-
really important advice. And it's, my favorite thing is to close Outlook or turning off the Wi-Fi is amazing. Oh my God. That was I don't do it very often, but every now and again I'm like, I need to think.
funny how we need to give ourselves that self-control. We need to turn 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 off something in order for us to get our lives back.
Well,
How to process
I
that.
think here's something else then I think is I'm especially interested in, yeah, publications that help us remember. Oh, what was it? What was it? Yeah, kind of that we're human, that we're people, and we're making music. I think that those are really important things for me to remember. Yeah, it's about process, it's about relationships, and it's about experience. I want to keep bringing it back to that because
Mm.
often, again, not many people are kind of, born writers in the sense that they don't want to spend their time writing. And so it feels like something we do about other things, like we write about other things. So anyway, process is important.
Process is important. I've got the questions are coming in. I've got one from Jeff Mabaya, and he's asked, "What is your opinion on AI, especially when it is used for proofreading language?" I'm sure you have opinions on this.
Yeah, so I think it's really vital for people who would like to proofread their writing that way. But I'm really obsessed with process. I used that word a dozen times a minute ago. So yeah, I think if it's as a means to an end, I support it. But for myself, I would rather go through the struggle. Like I would rather drive a manual transmission car because I enjoy engaging with the road and the gearbox and listening to the car and feeling it. And I would rather play acoustic drums in a room because I enjoy the feel of the wood. I'm not that excited about having a drum track finished. What I want to do is hold the sticks and like go through the process. So again, I think AI is amazing. I think it's a really helpful means to an end. But the thing that concerns me about AI is that it focuses too much on product and output. And I absolutely would encourage people to engage in the meaningful process. That being said, if you're not a born writer or a born researcher and you find yourself in a profession where you need to publish a bunch of stuff all the time, it's a really helpful means to an end. But yeah, that's my kind of like uh, instinct about AI is it's brilliant, and I've co-written some songs with AI, and it was kind of fun. But I'd rather spend months sweating in a room with my band, than I would have AI and knock out something in 30 seconds because I feel like I've missed out.
Hmm.
That's kind of where I stand on it.
It's a is it that it feels like you're cheating yourself out of the experience, as you were saying?
Yeah, I think so. Like I don't know. I think for encyclopedia articles, I wrote a bunch of encyclopedia articles, and I really enjoyed the process of reading, I don't know, 2 dozen magazine articles and other encyclopedia articles about each drummer I was writing about. I could have just asked AI to write something about fill in the blank famous drummer, but it would. But again, I wouldn't have learned as much in the process. But I also understand English isn't everyone's first language. People need to get things out. So, and I think there's someone asked earlier on about the pressure in the profession to publish, and I think there's an unhealthy balance between expectations and people's abilities to meet them, or people's I'm not like intellectual abilities, but I mean the kind of the structure, the ability that our structures afford us to meet our kind of professional expectations mean that we might end up relying on AI. And again, I don't really feel like there's any shade on AI. I want to engage in the process
Hmm.
as much as possible.
It's process. We should get a tally up for the recording of this. See how many times you've said process.
I'm going to stop it.
Uh, uh, Xianjun Yu has had her hand up patiently for some time, and would like to ask a question, so I'll give her the floor.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Smith, for this excellent sharing. I learned a lot. I have one question. When we're trying to do research or to publish it, how do you figure out the feedback from the IRB or the peer reviewers? Sometimes they may give you a lot of feedback. It made me feel helpless. Yeah, thank you.
Shenjin, thank you. Also, Boston University representing, thank you. Goodness me, this this is one of the most challenging things is peer review. I have had so usually things go for 2 or 3 reviewers. My most ever is 5, and of the 5, one was like, "This is brilliant, publish it immediately, don't change anything," and another one was kind of like, "This is existentially flawed, everything about it is wrong, all of the assumptions don't add up," and the others were all kinds of like stylistic disagreements because the reviewers aren't talking, so they've each got these different views on it, and it's kind of like, well, I don't know how to reconcile them. So I wrote to the editor of the journal and was like, listen, I don't know what to do. All of these people are saying different things. Do I go with the one who says it's perfect and I should publish straight away? And he's like, no, not that. I was like, all right, well, that would have been too easy. So do we still want it do we think it's still a thing? In which case we kind of largely reject, but appreciate the input from the person who thinks it's not valuable at all. But it's really hard. And it's an iterative, slow process. I can only do it in bite-sized chunks. If I've got comments from reviewers, I will read the reviews once, twice, 3 times, and then address one comment at a time. And I'm really slow about it. I'm working on an article right now that, it's been accepted. So it's an article that's coming out about drumming and fitness, for example. And I always find the reviews feel like they're kind of a judgment of my very soul, and I try not to feel that way, but I do. So there's the emotional part of it, which is hard, but I have to deal with one at a time. I deal with one comment and I try and address it, and then I close the laptop, have a cup of tea, go for a walk, come back and do it again. And it takes me ages because I think however you find easiest to deal with them, one comment at a time helps me. And as I mentioned earlier, really important to remember that we are addressing feedback. So what you don't have to do is do everything every reviewer says. And I always have to be careful because often when you're responding to reviews, you'll be asked to change the article, but also write a separate document where you explain how you have addressed the reviewer's comments. And my first draft of these things, I'm not going to say sarcastic, but it's kind of an emotional response. So I have to go back and moderate my own responses, because I'll be like, well, following your clever comment about such and such, and then so I have to go in and moderate my responses. But it's again, that's because it's iterative, because first of all, I'm responding emotionally to the feedback, then I'm kind of responding intellectually to it, and then a week later I'll be like, oh, actually, in the grand scope of now I've changed the article, I can see how your comment's actually really helpful, and it wasn't that you hate me, you just have valuable input for how I can help this paragraph make more sense. So I think give it time, Let yourself respond emotionally because we have to, and then give yourself time to. And if the second and third reviewers have different opinions, then you can say, well, look, you can. I've said this before to reviewers. I say it all the time. This reviewer number 2 asked me to do this. Reviewer number 3 asked me to do something completely different. Given that I've written the article, I feel like, on balance, I'm going to go with what reviewer 3 said, with respect to what reviewer 2 said. Next time, maybe I'll do something more like that. So it's a conversation. And as a reviewer as well, I'm always grateful when people say, yeah, no, thank you for what you said, but I've misunderstood this, right? As a reviewer, I've misunderstood the article. Because I'm coming at the article as a drummer, as an Englishman, as a sociologist, and I bring that to everything I review. So it's absolutely fine when people write back to me as a reviewer and tell me, thank you for your feedback, but actually you've misunderstood, so we're not going to do what you said. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm still glad I spent an afternoon reading your work, but so it's I think yeah, give it time, respond feelingly, and then have a conversation and try to make it less about you and more about the work. That's me. It's about the work, about the writing. All the person reading it is doing is trying to make the manuscript better, and they're really trying to make it. It's about the paper, so try to make the paper better. One more thing I'll say: this article about drumming and fitness, I submitted it to the journal, I don't know, a year ago or more, and I remember the week before we submitted it, I wrote a brilliant, frankly, it was brilliant, literature review. It was about 800 words, and I condensed all this literature from drumming studies, and I was so proud of myself. And one of the reviewers said, oh, ditch the literature review. And I was like, what? This, you don't understand. The blood, sweat, and tears in the lit review. I read everything, and this is the perfect, and I took out like 40 citations. So my first response was like, no, no. And then I came back to it the next day and was like, you know what? If I take out the lit review, it's 1,000 words shorter. The article's more focused, and actually it makes a lot more sense. But I copied and pasted the lit review and put it in another document, so that maybe one day, if I need an 800-word lit review about something, it's there. I guarantee I'll never come back to it. But that was hard because it's a really good lit review. If anyone wants to see it, no, I'm joking. But it was anyway. So that was really hard for me, right? But I had to take the time to be like, all right, actually, they're right. It doesn't need, the fact that I did it doesn't mean it needs to be published. Still.
I'm sure it'll make it into an article soon. Just put it in every article you put out in the future. Just make sure it gets into something.
Yeah. Also, yeah, here's 800 words about drumming.
Here's what I prepared earlier. I've got one question that's come through earlier, and it's a little more specific than some of the others, and not necessarily about writing as process or practice. I've popped it in the chat, so it's easy for you to see. From apologize if I butcher the name, but Ixma Wabila. He just said, what would be your consideration on papers that have used Carl Mayton's legitimation code theory to help map out knowledge structures and literacy in general on instruments that are considered traditional in different contexts?
Ooh, I don't know that theory. I've heard of it recently, actually, but I don't know what it is. So, what's the question here? What would be my consideration on papers that have used it? So, I'll answer this question sort of from my perspective. I don't know the theory. So if I'm reviewing a paper that uses a theory I don't understand, I'm assuming I've been sent that paper by the journal editor because they think I have something valuable to say. So as someone who edits a journal, I'm very careful about who I send papers to. So if I received a paper to my journal about this, I would be like, okay, who do I know on the editorial board who understands Carl Mayton's legitimation code theory? And I wanted to send this paper to this person so that they have an input on it. Also, maybe it's from a particular national context, and I know someone who might be helpful to understand that. And maybe I know someone else as a reviewer who maybe understands the method better. So I think that's not exactly answering the question, but I would comment on the things I can comment on. And I would say in my review, I would say, I don't understand legitimation code theory. I don't know what it is. Please find another reviewer who does. Or I would read a little bit about it in whatever time I felt like I could dedicate to it, maybe a couple of hours, and be like, I've tried to read it. It seems like the paper's aligned. This isn't my specialty. Find someone who really gets it. I would have to say that. So yeah. And I think as a writer, I want feedback when I'm trying to use a theory. I want feedback from someone who understands the theory. because that's important, right? I want to make sure that I understand it because, I haven't read everything and I'm trying to do my best. And that was where Hildegard was really helpful, actually. Hildegard Freulich, writing the book about sociology with her. I would say things about, sociologists, and she'd be like, no, no, I think you need to read it again, which was really helpful. I tend to be in a bit of a rush sometimes. So, also, she told me she thought hip hop and punk were the same thing. So I had to say, well, they're not. So again, this is why people collaborate, right? So
Guess what,
sorry,
everyone.
apologies. Who's this question from? Yeah, sorry, I'm for not having a more thorough answer to your question, but hopefully that's helpful.
I'm sure. As we said earlier, we're here to hear your thoughts, and I think what you mentioned is an insight into the what I hope is the process of all peer reviewers. Bit of honesty and transparency. I hope that's the
Well,
goal
I've had also
for.
reviewers. I've had people say to me, no, the reviewers have said about if they don't understand something. I've had people say this isn't a real thing, don't write about it, and then that's like, well, just because you don't know about it doesn't mean it isn't a real thing. But also that's a helpful perspective because maybe it's not. Maybe anyway, it's all a conversation. And another, so I know I'm over time now, but I'm thinking even when we publish things, I published quite a lot. And I look back on some of the things I published 10 years ago with horror, because I wouldn't say those things now. But again, nothing's ever finished, right? We get the thing published and it feels really good and it's done. Oh my goodness, please don't read chapter 6 of my 2013 monograph. I'm super embarrassed about it. And I can't believe I let that go to press. So, if I were to ever write a chapter about ethnicity and drumming again, it would be vastly different. But 2011 version of me was quite happy with it. So, anyway, like it's never finished. We're always in conversation with ourselves. We're always in conversation with the literature. Be proud of the things we publish for sure, but also, we learn and we grow.
We learn and we grow. Gareth, I hope it's okay. I've got one last question for you, and I think it's a pretty exciting one. I've popped it in. It's from Veronica, and I'm sure a very simple one, perhaps not. How long does it take you to write an article or a submission on average?
Thanks
Give
for
us something
asking.
to aspire to.
I
20
think
minutes.
no, goodness no. Well, actually, a brief story before that. Lucy Green, who was my PhD supervisor and an amazing teacher and mentor, asked me to write. I think she'd been invited to write a couple of articles for an encyclopedia. One was about informal learning, and she said, "Could I write it on her behalf? Like, could I do it?" Because she didn't have time. So I was like, "Sure." And I wrote it, and I sent it to her for review, and she said, "No, what have you done? This is not it." And literally in 2 hours, she sent me back a flawless 2,000 word article, and she was like, "Just send them this." And I was like, "Oh, damn it!" She's so good. So not that I can't do that. Um, it takes me a while. It really takes me a while because I want to make sure that I understand what I'm doing. So I would say months. It takes me months to even something like the kind of easiest research in a sense, because if I'm not gathering empirical data, it's kind of easier to do a sort of philosophical piece. But even then, I'm reading and reading and reading. I'm going to say 6 months, soup to nuts, for me to write something that I'm happy to send in. And if I'm collaborating with someone, maybe it's quicker because they're writing different sections, but maybe that makes it take longer because their section doesn't fit with my section and we've got different ideas. So 6 months to a year probably to write something. I would say 6 months is quick. Yeah. Maybe actually, well, I also wrote something in 2 weeks once, but that was like 12 hours a day. I wrote something in 2 weeks and it was pretty good. But that might be my record, having just said 6 months. But I was writing a thing about neoliberalism, and I just kind of read a lot about it, wrote down what made sense, and also that was like on the very tail end of the extended submission deadline for the book. So I think they were like, "Great, it's in, send it off to print." Had that been a journal article, I'm sure it would have got a lot more review and feedback.
Right. Okay. Well, you've given us a target of something we can aspire to. We either have to aim for what is it, 2,000 words in 20 minutes, perhaps by the ends of our careers, or an average of 6 months.
There you go. Yeah, I think don't rush it, right? Like yeah. I also think something Hildegard said to me when you're writing our book together. She's like, a book's never finished; it's kind of abandoned. So the point of it, which like you just have to be like, you know what, I can't improve this anymore now. I'll send it off and engage in the
Hmm.
peer. sometimes I think, especially maybe senior colleagues can be a bit lazy with this. That I'll get articles that are definitely unfinished, and I'm like, they could have done a much better job, but they just want the reviewers to do the work for them. That happens. But also there's a point at which it's like, actually, I need help. Like, I can't do this any better. I need input from my peers. So anyway, I should wrap up.
That's yes, we've run a little bit over time, Gareth. Thanks for your time. Everyone who's attended, thanks for the extra few minutes as well. I think I can formally close this and give you a very gracious thanks and an appreciation for the questions and the presentation writ large. So helpful to all of us here at various stages in our various degrees and early careers. I'm sure we'll take it all on board. So, Gareth, thank you so much. And but we might have to have you back in the future, and if you get any new ideas, we'd love to hear them.
I maybe we'll see. No, absolute pleasure. Thank you all for taking the time. You've been very generous to spend this portion of your day with me. I'm grateful, and I hope it was helpful. So thank you all. And yeah, I look forward to reading everyone's work in the future, bumping into you at a conference, etc. It's been a pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
And everyone, just before you leave, you will receive an email for a survey after the conclusion of this. Please fill out that survey. It tells us more about what you want from these sorts of sessions. This session was in response to the survey